The Olympic Games are no stranger to scandal, and the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing seem to be sticking with that theme. Former Olympic athletes and sports experts are here to help us make sense of it all. Coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
We all remember the Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding fiasco of 1994 when Kerrigan, who was at the height of her figure skating career, was whacked in the knee by Tanya Harding's fiance, preventing her from competing and clearing the way for Tanya Harding to take the gold. Well, the 15-year-old Russian teen, Kamila Vieira, who was thrusted into the middle of a doping controversy after she tested positive for the banned heart medication trimethazidine in December, has herself been the subject of much debate during these Olympic Games. Two other heart medications were also found in her sample. Now, Camila was kept off the winner's podium after surprising errors in her final free skate, which happens today. If you didn't see it early this morning, you'll see it later today when the Olympics air on NBC. But the fact that she was skating at all has raised the ire of many past and present Olympians. Sports experts say it's a slap in the face to those athletes like Michael Phelps, Michelle Kwan, and Simone Biles who have fought for a clean sport. And African-American track and field star Sha'Carri Richardson, who was prevented from competing in last summer Olympic Games after testing positive for marijuana, says it's a double standard, and Camila is allowed to continue competing because she is white. And in other Olympic news, several African-American athletes have made history during Black History Month. Erin Jackson became the first Black woman ever to win gold in the 500-meter speed skating competition. Lots going on at the Olympic Games, and here for my leadoff panel are Elaine Zayak. She's a former Olympian who competed in the 1984 Winter Games. She's joined by Jennifer Gooseby Snellbly, who is a former Olympian as well. Hope I didn't butcher your name too much. She competed for Germany in the 1994 Winter Games, and Dr. Margot Shoup is here. She's a former figure skater who competed in the 1984 Olympic trials and is today a practicing physician. Good morning and welcome, ladies.
Morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
All of you super accomplished athletes, figure skaters, been to the Olympics, been to the Olympic trials. What's your reaction to the Olympic Court of Appeals decision to allow the Russian skater, the 15-year-old Kamila, who's been all over the news with this positive test for a banned substance? What's your reaction to the Olympics allowing her to compete? I'll start with you, Dr. Shoup.
You know, it's a very interesting problem that they have, because I believe that because of her age, the anti-doping portion of it only applies to people that are 16 and over, is my understanding, yet the Olympics allows people to compete at the age of 15. And so it's an interesting dilemma that they're in. However, obviously that's really the double standard in my mind, is that if these rules are going to hold true to anybody in the Olympics, it should hold true to everybody. And what's the point of having a rule if you're not going to follow it? And I think that's the main issue that we have today.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, Dr. Shoup, that you are allowed to compete at 15, but the rule with respect to doping only applies once you're 16. Do you know what the history is in terms of that 1-year gap?
I am not sure what that history is. I'd be curious to see if anybody else does, but certainly that's something that needs to be looked into, because that's really not fair to all the other athletes. And whether or not these drugs actually did help her performance or not, I don't know if we'll ever know that. But the point of the matter is that if it's a positive test, then why even test her, right? What's the point of testing her if we're not going to do something about it?
No, really good point. What was your reaction, Jennifer?
I think I went through sad, happy, mad. I think a lot of us figure skaters did, and coaches, athletes. What's happening right now, you see a lot of pushback from the skaters right now, and they're tweeting, they're posting about it. And what I feel is clean, and that's the only way to go. That's the fair way. Unfortunately, you know, the situation we're in right now, We don't know all the fine details. There's still a lot to be researched, and that's to come. But I believe that the reason, just like Dr. Shoup said, the reason why she was allowed to compete was because of that one rule that she's not of age yet. So
Well, Elaine, you know a lot about rule changes at the Olympics. I know that you were the first woman skater to do the triple jump in figure skating, and then the rules were changed to prevent skaters from doing that jump repeatedly in their routine. So, in that regards, the rules were bent to prevent you from succeeding. So, what do you think about this rule now that somehow seems to be allowing this 15-year-old to go forward?
Well, from my perspective, this is the future of what everything is going to be year after year now. There's going to be many, many changes going on. I do think that, she should not have been allowed to compete, but I'm glad that, she did get to skate. But I think it just should have been addressed before the Olympics, not at the Olympics. That's the unfortunate thing for her. And I feel bad for all the girls that were affected, and being at the competition and having to find it out at that point is really heartbreaking and sad for everyone involved. So I hope that the rules will change. So if anything is going to happen, it will happen before the Olympic Games start. And I would like to know how this all started at the Olympics. What happened there is that somebody let something out of the bag, I think, and it just went all over and crazy, and it kind of tainted the figure skating for the women's event especially.
Yeah, Dr. Shoup, what we're hearing from Camila's attorney is that the banned substance entered her body accidentally. He says the substance belonged to her grandfather, who was taking this heart medication, I guess, for his own health reasons. But what do you make of that explanation that it entered her body accidentally?
Yeah, I just find it very hard to believe. I think that any of us that were very competitive athletes at the age of 15 were very, very aware of every single thing that enters our body, every bite of food, every sip of water, every pill, every single thing that we did. We knew the calorie count of everything. I just have a really hard time believing at 15. She's not 7, she's 15. She knows her body well, that she doesn't understand that what she's putting into it. So that's just a hard sell for me to believe that.
Yeah, and Jennifer, Dr. Shoup raises a good point because a lot of people are being sympathetic to her because they say she's a minor. But give us some sense about at the age of 15, if you are a competitive figure skater at the level that she is, you're not your normal, everyday 15-year-old.
absolutely not. From my coaches, talking of my previous experience, from my coaches, even to my parents, back then things were printed. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have all this technology going on. We had a list of banned substances. We knew exactly what was banned, what we were allowed to put into our bodies. So I can't just put blame on the people that are around her. That's where honestly my emotions went in the beginning. But then thinking back to my own situation, we start doing junior world. When you go to junior worlds competitions, you're going to international competitions at 15, at 16, and you're already getting tested at that age, sometimes even younger than that. So if you're going through drug testing at that age, you have to know what it's all about. And it would be a shame to know that at that level of competition, she was not aware.
Yeah. Good point. Elaine, talk about what it is like to, prepare your body, the kind of practice, the kind of activities you have to engage in to get to that level of competitiveness, to make it to the Olympics. And obviously this young girl is an incredible skater. So that didn't happen overnight. This is years and years and years of her training. Give us a sense of what that training is like to become a competitive skater at the Olympic level.
Well, my training and getting back to also the doping, we are made aware. Our whole federation sends out forms to fill out. There's many things that we know and know not to do leading up to the Olympics, leading up to the nationals. So I know that they have that in place also. So it is a surprise that all of a sudden something comes out. But I do know that my training was, in the months prior to that competition in the Olympics, you know, you're trying to keep your weight down. You're trying to keep your head on straight. You know, every day is very grueling and some days aren't very good. You go home thinking, I can't do it. But, you know, to not know what, you know, is around you at 15, 16, usually girls that are in this sport are very mature at 15, very mature. We come out, you know, at 20 and we feel like we're old ladies retired. And I do know that, you know, training does require a lot of dieting, a lot of cardio, on and off the ice, and mostly off the ice is what I think is really helping these skaters now. So what they're doing, and I do blame not her so much, but the teachers or the scientists that are involved with these skaters in Russia. There's been many other issues going years past about, you know, the doping being tainted. So I don't know what they give these girls. They say they're vitamins, but I think in 1984 there was also East Germany was going through the steroid use, and so I do think there is questions to be asked on who actually is monitoring the girls as they're training and what vitamins so they're taking, and maybe that's what might have been something they were taking, they didn't know, and maybe it was prior, months prior, and then it stopped. Who knows? It's a question.
Yeah, lots of unanswered questions at this point. Dr. Shoup, how much temptation are skaters and Olympic athletes under? You know, how much pressure are they under? And, you know, how high is the temptation to take these kinds of drugs?
I mean, there's a lot of pressure for all these athletes, but they're all in the same boat. And you know, it's hard to, I don't know that the temptation to take a drug, at least in this country, I really don't think that that exists because everybody knows it's a banned substance and you really wouldn't think about doing it. I mean, people really know exactly how many days a certain drug is going to be in your system. I mean, as athletes, we really had that down. So I honestly think that as I look at how much figure skaters and gymnasts alike, they admire their coaches, they admire the people that are senior to them that are helping them to be successful, that it's probably hard to say no if somebody tells you to do something because it's best for you. And so that might be something to think about, that would be the pressure coming from a coach or from somebody who's really supposed to be there to watch out for you. In retrospect, you look back and realize it was probably the wrong thing to do. So I don't think there's a lot of temptation for taking banned drugs. I just don't feel it.
Jennifer, what about the remedy? One of the remedies that the Olympics committee put forth was that if she did get the gold medal in this free skating competition, she wouldn't be on the podium. Do you think that was, you know, was that just a slap on the wrist or was that a real penalty?
Honestly, I think it was a slap on the wrist for her, but where I think the biggest fault is for all those other athletes, the second and third place athletes that really deserve to be there, clean athletes, and that they wouldn't have that chance in the limelight. You know, you dream of going to Olympics, number one, and then to make it on the podium, number two, and not to have that moment. I think that was taking away a lot from other athletes, and I think that's where the real negativity came into play.
Yeah, Elaine, we're looking at all of your amazing trophies and awards that you won as a figure skater. What is that like to be on that podium? And help us understand, like you know, Jennifer said, what must it be like for those girls who were denied that opportunity?
I know the feeling of, you know, disappointment. I think my career was a very high, you know, as high as it can go, winning the world. And then there was lows, losing at certain times, you know, especially in the ages of 15 and 16, it's your mind isn't all there. You're not mature enough to really know how to handle the pain and suffering of losing. That's something that only happens, I think, with experience of losing and then winning. I do know that for me, it was so exciting, you know, to be at the Olympics. And I think that, again, even knowing that, a girl has their period or something like that, you have to understand how difficult those times are for people not to. You can't have any water pills, you can't take a diet pill, you can't do anything. Even if you have a cold, you can't take the medicine that you need to get rid of your cold before you're going to compete. So you really have to train your body and your soul to go out there and do it. And it's hard, but I think it just comes from believing in yourself and pushing to extreme limits too.
Definitely. So, Jennifer, another issue that's been plaguing these Winter Games are American athletes who are competing for other countries. And I know you once competed for Germany. What do you say in response to those people that say Americans who compete for other countries are betraying America?
So I can only take my situation in general. And really, when I was searching for a partner, it was the American judges that came forward to me and said, you know what, why don't you look internationally? And at that point, I had been in figure skating from the time I was 5 until I was 21. And my parents said, go for it. So what I ended up doing, ended up, a German boy actually contacted me and he asked me if we wanted to try out. We tried out and it worked. At that point, we decided, okay, do we skate for America? Do we skate for Germany? But it wasn't that simple. I had to change my whole life, move to Germany. I lived in Germany for over 14 years and I still consider it a home to myself, So it's not like you snap your fingers and you're able to do it. There are a lot of hoops you have to go through, but you have to think that my whole life from the time I was 5, I can remember sitting in even my getting my haircut and telling at 6 years old, telling my hairdresser, I'm going to go to Olympics someday. And that's a little kid, but that's your dream. And that dream does not go away just because, you know, you've had longevity in the sport. So it's not like I can just drop that dream and say, okay, I can't find a partner. I was in a different situation as Elaine. She was a single skater where I was a dancer. So I needed a partner to compete. And when I found that partner and we matched super well, what happened is we took it to the next level. So we wanted to keep going. And for that reason, we really considered it. And I had to be in Germany for years and also show that we could win our national championships. So once we were able to do that for 4 or 5 years in a row, that was only then that they even considered to grant me citizenship. So it took a long time. So it's not like you can just snap your fingers and compete for another country.
So these U.S. athletes who are competing for other countries, you're saying the requirements is that they become a citizen of those countries?
Many countries you cannot have dual citizenship. For example, I think China, you cannot have dual citizenship. I've heard a lot of these rumors. I haven't looked it up myself. And also for Germany, you cannot have dual citizenship. So at that point, I had to drop my American citizenship. But I still consider, even though I live in the States and I work in the States, I still consider Germany really, my home.
Dr. Shoup, did you have an experience with that where you had a reaction perhaps to an American athlete who competed for other countries? Because some people believe athletes, and I'm not speaking specifically about Jennifer's case because she just explained to us what her case was, but there's some who believe that athletes do that because perhaps they can't cut it in the US or because the competition is too great. So they look for other countries where perhaps they can advance where they may not be able to do so in the US.
Oh, sure. I trained at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs, and a lot of people from all over the world trained there. And we had several athletes that I skated with every day that we thought from the United States, but competed for other countries at Worlds and at Olympics. And I think we were more jealous of them than anything else. How lucky you are to be able to skate at the Olympics and represent a different country, because I knew some of us knew that we would never make the Olympic team. I made the international team, but never made the Olympic team myself with my partner. But I don't think anybody holds it against anybody else. It's a matter of, if you have the opportunity to do it, why not do it?
Your sentiments the same, Elaine? How do you feel about that? I know a lot of athletes I've heard speak out on social media. They're not as kind as you ladies are. In fact, they've been quite brutal to those athletes, some calling them traitors even.
I think that's sad because I do know that there are some really great skaters in our country. And sometimes there are politics going on with certain skaters that should go and shouldn't go. And it all is based now, though, on numbers. But I do think that, in years past also, that if you can't, seem to land the jumps on the right day, they kind of just dismiss you sometimes. But I think for a person, especially that has opportunities to go to an international competition, or there are spots and there's countries that don't have skaters, and maybe it's good to have someone that did represent United States go to China or go to Taiwan. I had taught two skaters that were junior national Taiwan champions, and in our country they wouldn't have gotten that opportunity to skate in the four continents or in the World Junior Championships. And it was a thrill for them to get to be on the podium, in their country. Their mother and father was from Taiwan. So I think that it's a good thing for skaters to be able to go wherever they want to go and skateboard.
What about now, Dr. Shoup? Should the USA get the gold, you think, in the team competition? We know it hasn't been decided what's going to happen. Will Russia get the gold? Will the US, who got silver, be bumped up to gold? What do you think the resolution should be?
There is no question in my mind the US should get the gold at the team competition. I mean, this is only fair, right? Rules are rules, and I think we just need to learn how to stick by them. But I'm not on that committee that makes that decision. And I'm a little bit biased because we're from the United States, but it just seems like everybody else is following the rules. So we need to award the people that are doing the right thing.
Yeah. Well, we've got to leave it there, ladies. I want to thank you all, Dr. Shoup, Elaine, Jennifer. Congratulations on your outstanding careers as Olympians, as skaters at the highest level of competition. Really appreciate your insights on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, thank you. Again, my next guest is Dr. Keitra Armstrong. She's a professor at University of Michigan and an expert on race and sports. I had an opportunity to sit down with her before the Super Bowl to talk about some of the issues swirling around the Super Bowl. So now I'm excited to get her insights on the Olympics. And of course, we're going to talk a little about the Super Bowl at the end of this interview. But first, Dr. Armstrong, what do you make of this Russian skater, 15-year-old Kamila, being allowed to skate after the positive test for a banned substance? And, right after that decision was made and she was allowed to continue to skate, track and field star Sha'Carri Richardson tweeted that this was essentially a double standard, given that she had been prevented from skating in the Summer Olympics after a positive test for marijuana. What do you make of the controversy?
I do think it's a double standard. I think age plays a part of it, as the previous guest, the previous conversation addressed. Part of it is age because because she's not 16, she's not held to the same doping standards. So I get that, but I have to tell you, it's hard to not see how race plays into this dynamic. And primarily because we know that Black bodies are treated differently. Black bodies are often treated to a different standard. Black bodies don't have the same protections and the same presumption of innocence as others. And so I am in Sha'Carri Richardson's camp. I do think that if Sha'Carri had been a different hue, maybe people would have explained why, or they would have been more sympathetic. She said she took marijuana, which we know is not a performance enhancing drug, because of what she was dealing with the death of her biological mother. Is that sympathy that should warrant us being more understanding of her situation? So yes, I'm in Sha'Carri's camp. I do think that there's an underlying undertone of race, because we've seen it in too many instances how Black bodies are treated differently.
Yeah, I think I misspoke when I said Sha'Carri was skating. Sha'Carri obviously is a track and field star, and this was the Summer Olympics, and she was supposed to compete in track and field, not obviously as a figure skater. But I think the issues are similar. The IOC, though, has responded to Sha'Carri's, her tweet, her comments about believing that this was discriminatory or somehow she was getting treated differently. And they said that this is a completely different situation. Different agencies are involved. They say the United States Anti-Doping Agency handled Sha'Carri's testing and her suspension. And they also try to distinguish the timing, because Sha'Carri's happened before the games, or before she was due to compete, with Camila, this happened after she was already competing. Do you think this distinction about timing is one of relevance?
You know, what I find is excuses generally satisfy those who make them. And so if that's what they want to land on, they'll find a way to justify it and provide a reasonable rationale as to why it makes sense. But it's just hard to swallow, to be honest. It's hard to swallow if the whole premise is the integrity of having clean sports. Clean sports are clean sports, as the previous guest talked about. And so the timing, I don't think should have any bearing on this. It's the principle. If the principle is to have clean sports and to not allow athletes who have banned substances in their bodies to compete, that should be the issue, not some type of nuance that will allow them to explain it away. So I don't buy the argument.
Why the rule gap? Why you can compete at 15, but the doping standards don't apply until you're 16? And this outpouring of support for Camila, who's 15, a part of what the Olympic Committee is saying is they want to protect her as a minor, that she's not responsible, that she shouldn't be held accountable for what the adults in her environment gave her. But I'm just curious as to why they even have that 1-year gap. Do you know?
I don't know. And I don't think it makes sense, quite frankly, because if you have the responsibility to compete at the highest level, then you have to have the responsibility for adhering to the rules. So it doesn't make sense to me. Also, if you think about it, some of the sports where the participants are younger, those are unique sports. And so I understand why they want to protect them. So we don't see 15-year-olds, let's say, playing basketball and some of the other sports. So we see gymnastics, figure skating, some of those that really have to adhere to the psychological and physiological and physical development of the bodies. So I respect that, but it makes no sense if they can be there and have a year grace period to do what they want and not be held to the same standards. Makes absolutely no sense at all.
Yeah, you wonder, why even test her? If she can't be banned from competing, what's the purpose of the test? It puts her in the worst light ever, right? So now she has this jacket as being a doper, but yet she's allowed to compete. So now all the other skaters are angry at her. The world is angry at her. So it's really the worst of all worlds for this 15-year-old who, I mean, it would have been better, test me and ban me. People could get with that, but test me, tell the world I'm positive, don't ban me. And then try to come up with these excuses why I'm not banned. Really bizarre. And my heart goes out to her. She is 15 at the end of the day, even though she may be a mature 15. No excuse, because as these skaters just told us, that at 15, you know what should and shouldn't be going into your body. So I do think that this notion that drugs accidentally entered her body, is completely bogus, fabricated, and not a very even good lie. If you talk about lies on the spectrum of good versus bad, this is a bad one. But I want to move on and talk about some first African-American Black woman, first African-American, okay, I already said Black, first African-American woman to win a medal in the 500-meter speed skating. How big is that? This is Erin Jackson I'm talking about.
Yes, it's huge. It is so huge because representation matters. And she is showing Black girls that, yes, you can be here too. For so long, Black girls have been relegated to the sports of basketball and track and field. And then we start to see more, with Simone Biles and some of the others and some of those other non-traditional sports that have typically excluded Black bodies. And so seeing her win and just seeing it did my heart proud, because I know all the little Black girls and women all over the country says, yes, we can have a space there too. So listen, let's not diminish the role of representation. You can't be what you can't see. You've heard that, right? So she's given a vision of inspiration to all the little girls who just didn't think that the skating, it being on the ice in Winter Olympics was a place for them. So I love it, and I'm so glad, and it illustrates that representation matters.
Yeah, and what's significant about this, American women haven't won this medal since 1994. So, I mean, she just broke this losing streak that the U.S. had. And I found it interesting, too. Erin was a roller derby champion. So she was out there skating, like street skating almost. She wasn't a speed skater on ice. So the fact that she was able to translate her roller derby skating into this medal is incredible. And then the story, her friend gave up her space because Erin had a near fall that didn't, qualify her, quite frankly. And her friend Brittany Bowe gave up her space so that Erin could compete. And Erin did her proud. She did her proud with this gold medal.
But you know what? It doesn't surprise me because, oftentimes when there's spaces when people of color are not allowed to be there, they find a way to get in some capacity. So we see a history of Black women transferring their skills from one domain to the next. And so, seeing how, she was able to take skills that she perfected in one sport and to transfer them to another, again, it just speaks to the integrity of the workout and the drive and determination that some people have to overcome barriers, be they racial barriers, structural barriers, gender barriers, all of those things. So I'm just proud of her. I'm proud of what we saw. And you're right, not only for Black girls, but for Americans. We finally get to win that sport.
Yeah, and then let's talk about Elena Myers-Taylor. She won the silver in the monobob sledding, first ever women's monobob event. So first, let's talk about that. Why? Why haven't women been in monobobbing?
I think we're changing the perceptions of where it's appropriate for women to be. Women have always been in the graceful sports, the gymnastics, the figure skating, because gender ideology says those are the sports that celebrate femininity. Right. And so some of those rugged sports that involve running and pushing an object, are you kidding me? That's not what women are supposed to do. And so trying to break those barriers to get into those spaces that have traditionally not been seen as feminine. And if you look at Elena, she's a mother and a wife. So she's like, how do you like me now? She's breaking all of these stereotypes and helping people to reimagine what motherhood looks like, right? What being a wife looks like, what being a Black athlete looks like. So she brings a convergence of a lot of identities into one that I think is going to inspire a lot of people.
Yeah, that intersectionality, not only is she a wife and a mother, which when I read that, I too was like, oh my God, this is huge for women, for mothers. She's 37 years old. So she's also not your traditional 20-something-year-old athlete competing in the Olympics. So she's representing that at any age,
yes,
you can achieve greatness. You don't have to give up on your dream because you get to, 25 or 30. You heard one of the skaters this morning said by the time they were 20 years old, they felt like old women because they had been competing for so long. So here, Elena, I don't know how long she's been training or competing in this sport, but I'm sure she didn't roll out of bed and decide I'm going to go get into the Olympics. She's been training for a considerable amount of time. So I just love that she's representing more mature women. And 37, she's clearly not ready for anybody's Social Security, but she's, again, older than most athletes. Mothers, African American. She's just crossing out all the boxes. She's crossing the boxes.
She is.
In a big way.
I agree with you. I think what we're seeing with the snippets of athletes that we've talked about, we're seeing the different shades and the different permeations of Black girl magic. And that's what I love. That's what we need. And given everything that's going on in our country, seeing those little snippets and those visions of inspirations, I think that's critically important. So I think it's something that all of us can be proud of.
All right, you mentioned Black Girl Magic. We got to talk about this epic halftime Super Bowl performance. Your OG from Long Beach. I know you worked at Cal State Long Beach. You did D-O-double-G and Dr. Dre. Did they deliver?
Of course they delivered. When you talk about Areva, yes, they delivered. They brought the music, they brought the magic, they brought the Blackness. They really represented hip hop, I think, in a very special way. And they reached a lot of audiences, and many of those audiences were not, they didn't understand what hip hop was, so they reached new audiences, new global audiences. But yes, they represented and they delivered a halftime performance. And, I've heard the reviews, and for the most part, people thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I agree, I really enjoyed it. And so, yes, having worked in the LBC, I appreciate what Snoop and Dre and the rest of my listen, honorary homeboys, they're my honorary homeboys. I think it was a great way, again, of showcasing Blackness on the largest stage that we have for sports.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And viewership was up. I think 7% for that halftime performance. Typically, they get 100 million people watching the Super Bowl halftime show, and I think this year they had a 7% bump from last year. We can't forget Mary J. Blige. We talk about Black Girl Magic. She was the only
Yes.
female on that stage, and her representation, that soulfulness that only Mary J. Has, was in full form at that event. Now, you told me on Saturday, you were on my radio show, KBLA, Areva Martin Out Loud, on Saturday before the Super Bowl. You told us to watch not only what was happening on the stage, but to look at the arena, to look at who were in those skyboxes, and to be discerning about what we saw. So tell us what we saw that wasn't on the stage that is important for us to note for this big Super Bowl game.
Yeah, we didn't see enough of Blackness in other corners of the experience. We saw it on the fields of competition. We know over 70% of the athletes are Black. So we saw Blackness producing this spectacle. We already talked about the halftime entertainment. We saw how, elements of Blackness and the Black talent was entertaining us. But we didn't see enough Blackness on the sidelines as coaches, in the suites, as sponsors, just in the other gamuts besides the production and entertainment.
Yeah.
So we have to do better. So you're right. I just want people not to be misled by the showcase and the extravaganza of the entertainment. We have to do better in other areas. We can't just use Black talent and Black muscle, but we got to use Black minds as leaders, as executives, as sponsors. And so that's what was missing when you look at the overall picture. Those were the blind spots from my perspective.
Yeah, I wrote a piece. I've posted on social media now. I've expanded it to an article I'm writing for Ebony that pretty much says what you said, which was the performance was outstanding and we should applaud it. And it gave us all this reprieve. We've lost so many family members. We've been through so much with the pandemic, and to have that 14 minutes to just, be totally removed from our suffering and our misery, and to go back in time, happier times, and to celebrate with those artists that so many of us have partied to, during our college years or whenever, that was fantastic. But we are smart people and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And it did not and should not distract us from what's happening with the NFL and the huge race problem that they have. The statement that was made by Roger Goodell before the game that we are totally committed to diversity, such a vacuous statement when you look at the numbers. And then this lawsuit, Brian Flores, I want to ask you what you think about this. Word came out in the media that our former African-American Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, first Black woman to be the Attorney General, is at one of these large corporate law firms, Paul Weiss, I think it is, and they've been retained to represent the NFL. Obviously strategic on the part of the NFL, at least they believe it is. What do you make of that?
I was a bit exasperated, to be honest, when I saw it. Like, far be it from me to deny anyone of any employment opportunity. Right. The mere fact that it's a sister that gets an opportunity to represent, I appreciate that. I just wish it were not this particular case, because it's a way of almost undermining the racial undertones. Like we have a Black woman who's going to tell you why it's not racism. It's very strategic. It's condescending, kind of hypocritical, even in some regards. But I respect her job. I respect the responsibility that she has. It's just also another smokescreen way of trying to diminish the real issue. See, I think the NFL is like this. It's like they give us this flower that has this beautiful rose. So we see the flower, the bloom of the rose, but they want us to forget that the rose has thorns. There are thorns that are embedded in the stem, in the system. So while we celebrate the rose, the bloom, let's not forget about the embedded thorns of systemic racism. And so I see, them hiring her is another bloom. It's a flower. Look at what we're showcasing. But we know that there are thorns that are embedded in the stem that we must not forget.
Yeah, it's such a white supremacist gangster move, because here's the reality. Only 2% of lawyers in this country are African-American women. So we're so underrepresented. That number is even smaller for Black women who are partners in major firms like this law firm. So There's so few of us at all. So that means we're not going to be representing these big corporations and these big impact lawsuits. So it's like you got the Black woman, she's a partner in the big firm, she gets the chance to be the lead attorney on this case that's going to bring in hundreds of millions of dollars to the firm. So it's going to elevate her as a Black woman, as a partner. but yet it's going to undermine, as you said, everything we are talking about and every issue we are raising with the NFL. And it's going to give those folks who want to keep the status quo, now they got a receipt. Well, if the former U.S. Attorney General, this Harvard educated Black woman, says there's no structural racism, case closed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, if nothing else, the NFL is, they're cunning, but they're smart. Listen, they're smart, but we just have to hold them accountable. We can't allow them with these smoke screens and the facades, you know, that they've been putting in front of us. And so I just hope that we continue to be discerning, and I hope we continue to hold them accountable and to put pressure on them to do better. We always say this, right? When we know better, we should do better. But we only do better when people hold us accountable, right? Only when we're accountable.
Yeah, and you know, Loretta is a good friend of my husband's. I love her, but we're gonna have to go to town on sister if she gets in the way of this fight with the NFL. So we just want you to know, Loretta, we love you, but the battle is bigger than any of us. And those of us who are fighting for racial justice got to continue to fight no matter who is on the side of the NFL. And if you choose to be on the wrong side of history in this case, then you know that's just a personal choice you're making. But it will not stop us, cannot stop us from continuing to beat this drum about racial equity as it relates to the NFL. Thank you so much, Dr. Armstrong. Always my pleasure. Great insights as usual. Yes, your Compton, Long Beach rappers showed out. They showed up and they showed out. So it was an epic performance that we will all be talking about for years to come. Good to see you, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Now, my next guest, he's back with us. He's an Emmy Award-winning sports journalist and commentator. His name is Jim Watson, and he's always right on point with issues, anything sports. We always have to ask Jim. Jim, good morning and thank you. You have been at the Olympics, Jim. You've covered the Olympics. Are all of these controversies swirling around these Winter Games? Is this anything new, or this is just business as usual for the Winter Olympics?
It's business as usual for all Olympics, all international sporting events. You can date this back to 1980. Remember that the Russians hosted the Olympics in Moscow in 1980. And there's a British journalist, Andrew Jennings, who said he thinks every Russian athlete who won a medal at those games, and certainly all the gold medal winners, remember the United States boycotted, so the Russians won an inordinate amount of gold medals. He claims that every one of them was part of their state-run doping program. So it dates back to 1980. It's been going on. They've been doing it forever.
Why does the International Association that governs the Olympics, why do they allow it to continue?
The International Olympic Committee is in charge of the Olympic Games. And listen, we've known this. The answer to all of your questions is money. It's a great comment. Don Ohlmeyer, the great NBC sports executive, said it many years ago. We learned it from Woodward and Bernstein with Watergate. Follow the money. Well, in this case, it's also power as well. Remember that when Russia also hosted the Sochi Olympics in 2014, those went off and they looked great. Everything looked great. The weather was good. The snow was good. The Olympics went off. It was smooth. What did that do? It boosted the approval ratings of Vladimir Putin. So remember, this is all intertwined. There's even a conspiracy theory right now on the internet, and who knows if there's any truth to it, that one of the reasons that Putin has not made a move into Ukraine right now is because he is letting the Olympics in Beijing and his friend Xi finish the Olympic Games, therefore not to distract or overrun what's going on with that party right now. Now, who knows if it's true? It was on the internet, and I hear that sometimes the internet's not right.
Yeah, it's hard to know what's fake news or not, but that's really disheartening, Jim. I mean, it's sober reality, right? That money and power dictate these games. But what about all these athletes who do adhere to the rules, who are clean, who are not using these enhancing drugs? What does it say for those who compete all their lives to get to the games, only to have to compete against someone who's positive or who's tested positive for a banned substance, knowing that it's all about money and power?
Areva, you did this right growing up. You dreamed what you wanted to be when you got older, and you worked towards it, and you prepared yourself. Olympic athletes do that. You and I get multiple years to try and find success on some level. They have one platform, and for most of them, they have one moment, one day at one Olympics game. And when they look over, say in the starting blocks, and they're wondering, is this a level playing field? It's going to affect your performance. Even if you can get through that when it's over, and then you find out that there's rumors of testing or someone does test positive and the punishment is not handed down. Can you imagine having to walk around with that feeling of injustice for the rest of your life? I don't know what that would be like because I never spent 10,000 hours doing anything in my life except for napping and snacking.
Well, you're like most Americans, Jim, so don't be too hard on yourself. Question though, we're trying to understand this 1 year gap. Do you know why you can be tested at 15, but the rules about banning and the rules that are applicable to those athletes that test positive don't kick in until you're 16? Why the grace period?
Well, I heard you guys talking before, some of your other guests, about the age limit at the Olympics. What is the age limit at the Olympics? Well, this is a perfect example of why the Olympic Games have so much drama and so much confusion. Do you know what the age limit is at the Olympic Games, Areva?
No.
There isn't one.
Okay.
There's not. It goes to each international body for each sport. An alpine skier has to be 17. Biathlon, because they're carrying a rifle, got to be 22. But we've seen in Summer Olympics athletes as young as 11 years old in table tennis, 12-year-olds in rowing. You've seen gymnasts, 13, 14, 15-year-old. And you wonder, is it too much? Is it too much psychologically? We know it's too much physically on some of these athletes. So there is not an age limit, because if you start to do that, then people could come in and say, well, that's ageism. And if somebody's ready at 14, they should be allowed to compete at 14. We have athletes jump from high school basketball straight into the NBA. If they can handle it, then they should be allowed to do it. So
I'm fine with no age limit if their body and psychologically they're ready. But why doesn't the rule about doping then apply to all age limits?
yeah, that's the point. See, now if you're gonna enter into that arena, then you accept all of the requirements, the parameters, the rules, the restrictions, right? So what's good for one is good for all. And I heard the doctor saying that earlier, that it should be a level playing field. If this is your arena, then if you get tested and you test positive, then the punishment should fit. Now they did punish.
One thing that would do, Jim, that would put pressure. That would put pressure on those coaches of those 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. They would know you're not going to be able to hide behind she's a minor or he's a minor. If this individual, no matter what age they are, tests positive for a banned substance, they're going to be banned from the game. So that's going to put all those adults on notice to behave themselves. This rule gives these adults a safe harbor. They get to accidentally have drugs put in the body, right, of one of their athletes, and then stand back and say, oh, she's a minor. We have to protect her. Blame us, the adults, but let her keep competing. It's so unfair.
Don't hate the player, hate the game. Okay, so you can be as mad as you want at the Russians, but they're using a loophole. So close the loophole, right? So you have to go back to the IOC. The IOC, the International Olympic Committee, are the keystone cops of international sports. They have been rumored to be corrupt. And we know from watching Olympic Games over many years, they're also inept, and that's a toxic combination. Now, it's a tough job. Remember, you have 200 countries coming to an Olympic Games. It's all crammed together in a short time, mixing all those cultures, all that pressure, all that money, political influence. It's a thankless job. It's impossible to do it right. Just watch what the NCAA struggles with in our own country. Now imagine you're throwing in all these different languages and different expectations, and everybody's trying to gain an advantage, because one performance at the Olympic Games by one athlete changes the trajectory of not only that athlete, but that country, their program, that sport, the Olympic Games. It just is a ripple effect that goes out. So you can't underestimate how much this is. But the IOC, again, don't take the job if you don't want to do the work. This is the IOC's problem, right? What are they going to do? How are they going to punish people? They need to be more punitive. They came down in this case with the Russian skater, and they said, okay, we're gonna punish her by saying she can't be on the medal stand. Going back to your clean athletes, that punishes the other athletes who are also on that podium who might be clean, and they don't get that moment. They don't get that photo, that moment of standing there with a medal around your neck, representing your country. If you win gold, you get to hear your national anthem. That's taken away from them too. So we're accommodating the person who violated the rule
and punishing these
people who are clean.
Yeah. What do you make of the timing of the testing. So that was one of the things the IOC is trying to distinguish with respect to Sha'Carri Richardson, saying that her test results came out before she was allowed to compete. The test results with respect to this Russian skater, although this test was done apparently in December, we're just now getting these results. What do you make of that?
Well, Areva tested on Christmas Day, December 25th. The results didn't come back until these Olympic Games. You'd wonder, why in the world does it take so long to do that? I can get a COVID test in 15 minutes right now.
Right.
The problem with testing is that testing will always trail technology. You don't just test for everything. A medical person will go test for certain things. What am I looking for? In layman's terms, it would be like me saying, can you help me look for my lost dog? And then I don't tell you what my dog looks like. You couldn't possibly go find my dog. So you have to say, look for these certain things. Well, if this is a state-run doping program by Russia, they're going to be way ahead. They're going to be trying different mixes of cocktails and different drugs that work. This is a coronary heart medication that this woman, this young girl, has been accused of taking. And so if you don't even know what you're looking for, how in the world could you find it? But so the results come back during the Olympic Games. She's already competed. Now you're in that weird area. What should they have done? Well, if they pull her out, right, then they can come back and sue later. They can boycott. They can do all kinds of things, because you can't, if you find out you're wrong later, go back and say, okay, now you can skate 3 months after the Olympics and we'll judge you and then we'll hand out medals again. So what they did is they said, well, let's let her skate and give us some more time to figure it out. And then if we find out for sure that she's violated the rule, then we can strip her of her medals. It happens all the time. Medalists are pulled 4 years, 8 years later on all kinds of things. So, you know, it's like in the NFL when they blow a play dead, and the guy picks up the ball and runs for a touchdown. We find out later it shouldn't have been blown dead. So let the play continue, and then you can go back and rearrange the chairs afterwards.
Yeah, I hear you, but that's, again, I'm thinking about those skaters who are not going to have an opportunity to be on that podium and receive their accolades and their, international attention because of this one individual. Seems like there needs to be a better way to deal with this that doesn't punish those who had nothing to do with it. What's your prediction about this gold medal for the team skating? Right now, Russia has the gold medal. The U.S. has the silver medal. Do you think the U.S. will end up getting the gold because of this controversy?
Well, the question is, do I think it's going to happen, or should it happen, right? Of course, I think it should.
Do you think it's going to happen?
You violate a rule, I'm sorry, that takes down that athlete, takes down that team. So Russia doesn't win the gold. The United States had silver. The United States should move up. People would say I'm being jingoistic. I'm rooting for the Americans, so I want it to happen. But it seems pretty cut and dry. What do I think will happen? Probably not.
Yeah. That's kind of sad, Jim. You said probably not.
Yeah.
Wow. So we end up with a silver medal, and the Russians get to cheat, and they get the gold. Are they the country that has the most horrific history of cheating in the Olympic Games?
Yeah, there's been over 150 Russian athletes who have been caught doping at the Olympics. 43 Russian medals have been taken down. They are 30% higher at being caught doping than any other country that's ever competed in the Olympic Games. So yeah, they're the culprit, but they're not the only ones. American athletes have been caught doping as well. It goes across the board. So we have to be a little bit careful just pointing fingers at Russia. Yeah, maybe they're the ones who've been caught the most because they're the ones who do it the most. They're the ones who are the best at it.
What sport, Jim, have we seen the most doping?
Track and field. It's not even close. Track and field has always been that way. In fact, when I was a kid, track and field was almost as big a sport as football, basketball, and baseball in the United States. My brothers and I would watch international track meets on TV, on Wide World of Sports on ABC when we were kids, and then go out in the backyard and do it. Track was a big deal. Track started to fall, especially when Ben Johnson wins the 100 meters for Canada, is caught doping afterwards and has to give back, strip his gold medal. The same thing happens in sports like boxing and horse racing. Once people can't trust it anymore, once you lose your integrity, then you lose your audience.
Right. Do you think that's going to happen to figure skating as a result of this controversy?
Oh, no. The drama queens love it. It's all part of it. Did you hear Johnny Weir's go crazy? Yeah.
Johnny Weir and Tara Lipinski, they're quite upset about, they're sympathetic. At least Tara, I saw her say how sympathetic she was, but she says it's not fair and she shouldn't have been allowed to skate.
And there you go. It goes back to what we were talking about before. Those were athletes. They understand the amount of effort, energy, and emotion put into it. And then to have it taken away from you by someone who steps outside the margins. It's got to burn a little bit. And they reflected. And, it was interesting that NBC gave them that leeway. Now, those two have always been allowed to kind of do their thing. And I was encouraged. I did 4 Olympics for NBC. And I understand, there are certain things you can say and certain things you can't say. You can't criticize the home country on your own. It has to be a party line. But to let those two, show their disgust on international television, I think it spoke volumes. It shows you where NBC has come down on it, where Americans come down on it, and the international community, because it's not just America. A lot of people are upset about it.
Yeah.
But the Russians don't care. They don't care because, look, they're not even competing as Russia, right? They're competing as the Russian Olympic Committee. They have a neutral flag. If they win a medal, you don't hear the Russian national anthem, which is
And is that because Russia has been banned from these games?
You hear Tchaikovsky? Yeah, they had a 4-year ban. WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, gave them a 4-year ban. They appealed it. It was knocked down to 2 years. A lot of these Russian athletes said it's not fair to us either. We're clean. Not all Russian athletes are dirty. A lot of the Russian athletes, and you were talking about this in an earlier segment, they don't even live in Russia. They don't compete in Russia. They compete internationally and live in a different place. So they said, I'm not part of this program. I shouldn't be punished under the same ban.
I'm glad you brought that up because I did ask one of the skaters in the earlier segment about Americans who are competing for other countries. We have several in the Winter Games doing that. And the skaters gave the explanation that if you get your shot, no matter what country it's for, take it because you train for this, you dream for this. But we're seeing a lot of pushback online where Americans are saying, look, you're a traitor. How can you betray your country to go compete for another country? Where do you come down on Americans who are ditching America to get the gold medal or silver or bronze for another country?
I've seen at the Olympic Games, I've seen hundreds of athletes, not just Americans, other countries. They move around. If you have a loose tie, this especially happened 2004 in Athens because the Greek Olympic team was missing a lot of athletes. So they borrowed from America. We have so many Greeks in America. It worked out. Nobody had a problem with it. The problem here is it's China. And China is the worst abuser of human rights. We know about the situation with the Uyghurs. So Eileen Gu, the snowboarder, and this is what everybody's talking about, born and raised in San Francisco, a Chinese mother, an American father. And she says, I want to go compete for China. Hers was different because, according to your conversation earlier, those athletes didn't have a choice. They couldn't make the American team, so they looked for a second option. Eileen Gu is one of the best snowboarders in the world. She would have made the American team. The fact she chose to go compete for China is that's where it rubs people. That's the friction right there. And because of China's reputation on human rights, that's what makes people angry because she's bringing glory to the Chinese people, right? So if she's representing the people, that's fine. If she's representing the government, but it's all one thing. And then, as you guys mentioned before, China does not recognize dual citizenship. So did she forego her American citizenship for Chinese citizenship? Or did the Chinese say, we'll make an exception and violate their own rule? Everybody's been hush-hush. The biggest problem for Eileen Gu is she won't answer the question. And they should have helped her and had this arranged ahead of time. What are you going to say? She keeps talking about representing all peoples and being a force of unity. And that's all beautiful. But at some point, you have to answer that question or you're never going to be on a Wheaties box.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if she should be on a Wheaties box. That's the question, right? If you can't pledge your allegiance to America, then I don't know. Maybe you don't even deserve to be on it. I vote for Aaron Jackson to be on the next Wheaties box.
That's
All
a
right.
story.
That's my vote. First
That's
Black woman to win that speed skating. Put her on that Wheaties box. We know where her loyalties are. We know she's an American.
And Areva, let me point out that you watch how many Black women, Black men now go into speed skating because your guest before said that's a role model. That somebody says, I look like that person. I can do that too. And I work in gymnastics and it's happened in gymnastics. 15 years ago in collegiate gymnastics, you would see teams with maybe one Black gymnast. Occasionally, they'd have two. Now you see teams of 4 and 5. Look at UCLA, look at Florida. It's
representation, as Dr. Armstrong told us, matters. Got to let you go, Jim. Appreciate you being here. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thank you for your insights. And again, my vote is Aaron Jackson for that Wheaties box. We'll see what happens. We're going to be following these games to the very end, but appreciate your time.
Thank you, Areva. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Well, I thank all of my guests this morning. If you are not watching the Olympics, you should start watching them. They're not over yet. So much going on. Lots of firsts being made, despite all the controversy. A lot of good things happening at the Olympics. So again, thanks to my guests for joining me this morning, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Just some words to live by before I get out. Follow the money. That's what Jim said. If you are watching sports, you can cheer for the athlete that you love, but recognize that sports, like so many institutions in this country and worldwide, have an element of corruption. But don't let that stop you from celebrating athletes like Aaron Jackson and others who put thousands and thousands of hours towards their sport. Be safe out there. Wear your mask. Remember, we're all in this together.